Question, you had a question?
No, I just want to remind you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thank you. I need to do a proper lecture on Durkheim at some point. This was not a proper lecture on Durkheim. Still, work in progress.
Of course, the goal. I mean, what Marx was talking about, it feels like that the economy works for people to be efficient. Like, if you go back, like super back, it wasn't for efficiency in the first place.
No, Marx would agree with you 100%. Yeah, it's true. But the point is that once economy or arrangement of economic life became about efficiency, it became sort of more efficient, more competitive, acquired a competitive edge. And so a system which is driven like profit for profit's sake, like capitalism, outcompetes and drives to extinction a less efficient system such as feudalism. It outcompetes and drives it to extinction. And it's very important. Something this is bad because I'm trying to find a better way of explaining all this, and I didn't do a very good job, but I'm trying. One thing I certainly had to mention and I failed, and it's kind of bad, is that again, see, power is structural and anonymous. If you think that it is a chief of a tribe who orders people to dance the rain dance, you're wrong. It's not the chief of a tribe, right? You have this evolutionary story. Tribes that have rain dances outcompete tribes that don't. In a similar fashion, if you think that the bourgeoisie are evil and they exploit the proletariat, you're not reading Marx. The bourgeoisie are not evil and they're not to blame. It is a structural system. You have selection pressure. Let me give you a very simple example. If you are a capitalist and you take pity on the workers and let's say you raise wages, what happens to you? You go bankrupt and you stop being a capitalist. Selection pressure. Marx calls this coercive laws of market competition. Coercive laws of market competition. I mean, ideally, and Marx is not really talking about capitalism as it exists, but he, like in Das Kapital, he mostly talks about spherical capitalism in a vacuum. But within this perfectly competitive spherical capitalism in a vacuum, producers are price takers. You know this from your economics courses. In the idealized model of perfect competition, producers are price takers. In a similar fashion, like in the wage market, capitalists don't decide on what the wage is going to be. Like it's like if you, it's like there's a competitive wage which emerges, and if you are paying even 1 cent higher than the competitive wage, then you go bankrupt. I mean, that's not 100% how the world works, but that's a tendency.
Allegedly.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's like this is kind of ideal versus reality, ideals versus reality. But it's like what Marx is going to say is like you shouldn't think of capitalism as evil or capitalists as evil. It's not evil people doing evil things. It is the logic of the system, which is structural and anonymous. Like in an important sense, again, of course, you're going to have idiosyncrasies of character, like maybe also a capitalist is individually sadistic and derives pleasure from exploiting the workers. That may or may not be true. But even if you are altruistic, you will have to exploit the workers because the coercive laws of competition in the market will drive the wage down, at least in the long run. Or, it's like you could say, well, no, but if people are starving, they are not very productive workers. Well, yes, but it's like Marx is going to say, again, the system is tailored towards efficiency for the sake of efficiency. So to the extent that you being healthy and happy makes you more productive, the system will be tailored towards that end. So it's like, capitalism doesn't, like the wage is driven down, but not to the level when people starve. Because if people starve, they're not workers anymore. So it has to be above that. Well, how about education? Being able to afford education and education for children. Well, to the extent that being educated makes you more productive, then the subsistence wage, the reproduction, the minimum wage will have to include that too. So, and it's like in an important sense, Marx wants to say that this is kind of like thinking of evil capitalists versus poor proletarians. This is not Marx, okay? This is utopian socialism, Christianity, whatever. But it's not Marx. Marx is structural analysis. It's like structural sociological analysis. Sex is work. Sex is work. Why? Because working class has sex, it produces children. Children are future workers. Sex is work. It produces workers in the next generation. Education is work. Eating ice cream, maybe, quite possibly, is also work. Because eating ice cream helps you unwind after work, helps you be more productive the next day. It's like, I had this insight. This is when I explained commodity fetishism and sort of this exchange of slave labor versus slave labor. I'm actually, who cares about forms, whatever. It's like, let's talk about this. This is more fun. I'm very interested in China. I'm a huge fan of China. In fact, I think if Martians came to Earth and they looked at the history of the Earth, they would say that the history of humanity is the history of China and a bunch of barbarians running around. And it's true that for the most of human history, Chinese economy was probably larger than the economy of the rest of the world combined. What I'm driving at, it's like I was listening to this, well, I was reading a book about Chinese history, let's oversimplify. And in the book, there was a chapter when they were talking about how certain provinces at some point of Chinese economic development started specializing in, not just in rice, but also in tea and silk. And I asked myself this question: why do you need tea and silk? I mean, why do you need rice? That's very clear in terms of competition and efficiency. It's super clear. You don't even need to ask this question. Like, what does the emperor want from the people? The emperor wants rice, because rice means more population. More population means more soldiers. Kind of, rice is at the same time more farmers who grow more rice and more soldiers to sustain the system. I mean, why do you need farmers and soldiers and rice? That's clear. That's clear. It's like when the Mongols come, the more rice you have, the better you are able to withstand the onslaught of the Mongols or whatever, right? So it's like, you don't need to explain that. But why do you need tea and silk? You cannot fight Mongols with tea and silk. And so this is when I realized, and this I feel a deeply Marxist insight, that tea and silk are just ways of economic system of becoming more efficient. That if you are a, let's say, a landowner or somebody, or maybe, think of today, a capitalist, and your economy is just poor, there's only rice. Rice, there's diminishing marginal returns. There's only so much you can make a person work for rice. But if you give them the opportunity to work not just for rice, but for tea or for silk or for opium, then they will become more efficient. So kind of, it's like if you imagine this is a worker and this is a factory, what can you put between the worker and the factory to become the worker being more efficient? You can obviously give them rice, which is a necessity, but you can also give them opium, or you can put something like a brothel, whorehouse, or whatever, a tea shop. And all of these things, at the end of the day, the universal currency is simply efficiency. This is the only reason why tea and silk exist. And you could ask, well, why not opium? Because opium kills you too quick. It makes workers productive. And I mean, you've had this example, I say, of, I've recently watched a documentary about a city in America which basically ran on alcohol. Like, literally, you had a town of miners, and they worked for alcohol. I meant food, but mostly alcohol. Like alcohol and food. This was their motivation. But it's like alcohol destroys your body too quickly. Opium destroys your body too quickly. Silk and tea are like opium. They also stimulate dopamine receptors in the brain, but they do this like more gently. So, but at the end of the day, the answer to the question as to why these things exist is efficiency. And if you understand that it's a logic of efficiency and logic of competition, then you are not being a fetishist. If you think that, sort of like if you understand that the market is about efficiency and competition, then you're not a fetishist. If you think that market is about exchange of money for tea and silk, then you are a fetishist, Marx would say.
Rice is for efficiency too. Rice is for efficiency too.
Oh yes, no, 100%. But the notion is that rice, rice alone is not enough. If you add, again, think of this. If you are the emperor of China, like imagine you're playing a strategy game, It's like, and you think this is going to be my province for rice. This is also going to be my province for rice. The idea is that you can have like 5 provinces for rice, and if you make one of your provinces not for rice but for tea or silk, it increases the efficiency of your other 5 provinces. And only if your combined efficiency is greater, then things like tea and silk will evolve. Otherwise, you will be outcompeted and they will disappear.
Only if you're dealing with like buyers, but I'm saying, like, imagine you have like a bunch of hunter-gatherers who don't have rice, they just hunt. They do nothing. And then if someone gives them rice for another, just like, that's enough. That's great efficiency, like increase.
Well, again, with Marx or Durkheim or Michel Foucault, because I'm thinking of Foucault down the line. Foucault calls this governmentality. Foucault talks about these issues, like in terms of like, why does the government give us free education or free vaccination? Sometimes. And Foucault insists it's not because the government cares about the people for the sake of their happiness, but because it increases efficiency. That's his contention. So like if you think about this in terms of like long stretches of time, and Foucault gives particular examples. Like again, it's like he says Franco-Prussian War, like in the middle of the 19th century, somebody invents smokeless powder. I think that the first country to adopt smokeless powder was actually France. So France adopts smokeless powder. Everybody has to adopt smokeless powder immediately. Or it's like, like you have Napoleonic army, which is based on kind of nationalistic education, like formerly free army or formerly free citizens. And the formerly free army just outcompetes serf armies. So serfdom has to be abolished. I mean, like serfdom in Russia, to a very large extent, is abolished because Russia loses in the Crimean War. And Russia loses in the Crimean War to a large extent because free armies are just more efficient than serf armies. So it's an oversimplification, but again, it's a kind of spherical cone, a vacuum. These are the kinds of explanations. So it's like if you think about this, like at the end of the day, the idea is that hunter-gatherers, even hunter-gatherers, like they may be, again, if you look at bones of hunter-gatherers, they may be healthier and happier and live longer. But in terms of fighting against agriculturals, hunter-gatherers lose almost every time because agriculturals have strength in numbers. They can be diseased and short and miserable, but they have strength in numbers, so they will outcompete hunter-gatherers all the time. And again, historically speaking, it's true. You still have hunter-gatherers today. Hunter-gatherers exist in the world today, but they only exist in places where agriculture is impossible or is unviable. So in places like that, like you have Bushmen of the Kalahari Desert, because you cannot do agriculture in the desert, or it's not economically viable. Or you have hunter-gatherers in the Amazon. I'm sorry, these are details, obviously, you don't need. But it's like, actually, if you go to Amazon, I have no idea if you thought about this or not, but in the Amazon, the soil is extremely poor. Like you cannot do agriculture in the Amazon. Like, it's a lush forest, but agriculture is impossible. It's a geological fact. Wow, no time. This was